Good morning, everyone. Omar Richards here. You guys know I was gonna read The Millionaire Next Door, but I ended up going to Barnes and Noble to buy a book for a friend. Got caught up, found some books that I thought would be very interesting. So I think I'm just gonna read this book for the remainder of the month. I think it's fascinating and relevant to things that I could read today. It's called Black Fortunes by Wills. The story of the first six African Americans who survived slavery and became millionaires. So let's open it up with the introductions. Hope everyone's doing well. I grew up hearing stories from my mother about Uncle Johnny the millionaire. My great great uncle John Mott Drew, born in 1883, was a boisterous man with a hearty laugh who dressed in all black three-piece suits and wore white Panama hats on top of a head of wavy white hair. He was known for being frugal despite his wealth and gave the children in the family $2 bills and silver dollars for Christmas. Before he rose to millionaire status, John Drew was the son of a slave. His father, Napoleon Bonaparte Drew, was enslaved on a large plantation called Belmead in Powhatan, Virginia. Check that name, Napoleon Bonaparte Drew. Wow. Napoleon had a zealous work ethic and an innate sense of self-confidence, which he passed down to his children. After emancipation, he bought a farm in 1867 near the plantation where he had been enslaved and became the first black person in Powhatan County to own property. In 1875, he rented out his farmland and Napoleon moved north to Darby, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, with his wife, three sons, and a daughter. When his children reached adulthood, Napoleon sold most of his land in Powhatan. Take the money from the land and make something of yourselves, he told his children. In 1901, Simon Drew, his eldest son, opened an ice house in Darby where he sold oysters, beer, and ice cream. Simon was known for the parties he threw at his restaurants, as well as for being a lookalike for Frederick Douglass, with long white hair. Yes, that's actually funny. I picked up this book, Frederick Douglass. Anyway, Simon was known for the parties he drew in restaurants, as well as for being a lookalike for Frederick Douglass, with long white hair, smoothed black tightly, and distinguished beard. After opening a restaurant, he bought 4 apartment buildings in the black suburbs of Philadelphia and became a landlord. His brother John Mott Drew was an even shrewder investor. John started his career in real estate like Simon, but he eventually branched out to other more lucrative businesses. In 1919, he noticed that the people in the mixed-race towns of Vernon and Derby, where he also lived, had no way to get to work in Philadelphia and nearby Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. He took matters into his own hands, bought a bus, and began driving a jitney route from the suburbs to the cities. When he founded the John Drew Bus Line, he became the first African American to own a bus line. The enterprise grew over time, adding 6 buses to the fleet and several dozen employees. In 1930, he sold his business to a larger conglomerate under the condition that it would retain his black employees and never allow segregation on his bus route. John Drew was also a stock trader. He knew that directly trading stocks himself would prove extremely difficult and hired a white broker to trade secretly on his behalf. During the Roaring Twenties, John invested the profits from his bus company sale into the stock market and benefited from the historically profitable bull market. In the late 1920s, sensing that the roaring stock market had entered a bubble, he told his broker to pull his money out. He walked away with $250,000, $3.5 million in today's money, just months before many other investors were wiped out from the great crash of 1929. That's amazing, man. John purchased a local Negro League baseball team, the Derby Daisies. He operated the team for 2 years until it folded in 1932 due to low attendance, as during the Great Depression, fans had less money for recreational activities. John turned the ballpark into a gentleman's farm, furnishing it with livestock and grazed on the infield. John died without a will. His story made me realize that the economic achievement of African Americans dates further back than today's black elite. The creation of black wealth is an important but overlooked subject in the economic and social history of the United States. African Americans were treated as property during slavery and were stripped of their economic and social personhood, reduced to commodities to be controlled, managed, bought, sold, underwritten, and leveraged. Attaining economic independence and power was a revolutionary act. Black millionaires disrupt stereotypes of black economic importance. They remind us that African Americans do not lack the desire or ability to work or build businesses and wealth, but that instead they have often had to overcome great struggles to achieve economic stability that allowed independence and power. Early in our country's history, African Americans who achieved wealth were often attacked, demonized, or swindled out of their money by those who knew the Jim Crow court system would offer no redress to a black person. The black elite in their first decades of existence survived assassination attempts, lynchings, frivolous lawsuits, and criminal cases, all meant to destroy and delegitimize their wealth. Madam C.J. Walker was sorry guys. Madam C.J. Walker was memorialized as the first black millionaire not because she was the first to achieve wealth. She was far from the first, but because she was one of the first African Americans to flaunt and claim her wealth openly and fearlessly. The earliest black millionaires were conditioned not to be so brazen. Black fortunes tell the story of Mary Elaine Pleasant, Robert Reed Church, O.W. Gurley, Hannah Elias, Annie Turnbull Malone, and Madam C.J. Walker, America's first cohort of black millionaires and their journeys to their liberty and wealth. Mary Elaine Pleasant's story begins in the 1820s and spans nearly a century. She was a free black woman who was raised in New England during the whaling boom of the 1830s and 1840s that inspired Herman Melville's most famous work, Moby Dick. She left New England for California during the gold rush of 1849 and became wealthy as a commodity trader, a moneylender, and the proprietress of the high-end boarding houses. She used her wealth to fund John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry and supported the suffrage and civil rights activists and causes. Robert Reed Church was born a plantation slave during the peak of the cotton trade, the product of a liaison between a wealthy white steamboat captain and his black concubine. He escaped slavery during the Civil War and became one of the largest landowners in Memphis. Annie Malone was a daughter of slaves. She was abandoned at an early age, raised by her sister in Illinois. As a young woman, she invented a number of black hair products, which she later built into America's largest black hair brand. So awesome, huh? At the turn of the century, O.W. Gurley, a school teacher from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, built an all-black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Greenwood, which became known as Black Wall Street. The enclave served as a refuge for African Americans seeking a middle-class life and a safe haven from lynching and racial violence of the South, until it was destroyed by a white mob in 1921 during the Tulsa race riots. Hannah Elias was the black mistress of a white New York millionaire who heaped money on her. She used his gifts to decorate her mansion to look like Cleopatra's palace. When her wealth and affair with the white man was revealed, angry mobs set upon her house, and she was arrested. Elias eventually beat the charges and moved to Harlem, where she helped John Neal, a black real estate developer, turn the neighborhood into an enclave for New York's black residents. Researching stories of these titans of industry was challenging because they died more than 100 years ago, with the exception of Annie Malone, who passed away in 1850. Few records exist concerning African Americans before 1865. At the time, they were often viewed as non-citizens and seldom catalogued by census takers or vital record keepers. Further, in many cases, these men and women were self-educated and could read but not write effectively. As a result, they did not keep diaries or engage in letter writing. They had small families and only a few of their children lived to adulthood, leaving virtually no surviving relatives to tell their stories directly. Therefore, I relied on extensive archival research. I painted the stories of these accomplished people by surveying their own writings and letters, newspaper clippings, and oral accounts by their contemporaries that were documented. I labored over any available vital records in hundreds of hours of research. I have given an earnest effort to deliver an accurate and fair portrayal of these individuals' lives and their work. The establishment of wealth is fundamental to social and political progress. Wealth has the ability to transform communities and close gaps in racial disparities. During these individuals' lives, which span the 19th and early 20th centuries, an era when African Americans needed housing, jobs, and funding for political campaigns and activism, it was the black wealthy class that often supplied the means. Many successful black Americans, including the luminaries of black fortunes and my great-great-uncle John Drew, had to use white proxies to perform financial transactions to avoid being excluded on the basis of race. Today, as Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, and Robert Smith make up the first cohort of black billionaires, it's important not to lose sight of the industry and battle that that were waged and are still being fought to make such achievements possible. These stories are neglected parts of not only Black history, but also American history, and deserve to be told and woven into the tapestry of our shared history. Through the stories of America's first Black millionaires, we see the limitless potential of Black Americans despite structural inequalities, and we can glimpse the hope for one day achieving racial economic parity. I'm just going to read the first chapter. Prologue, the first Black millionaire. On the warm night in 1841, William Alexander Lissendorf sat on the porch of an old white house covered in vines in New Orleans with his fiancée, Hortense. As she leaned on the Lidersdorf, she could tell that something was bothering him. Hortense looked into his heavy-lidded auburn eyes. "What is troubling you, William?" she asked, looking up at him with her big blue eyes framed by blonde curls. Again, his better judgment, he confided in her. He stammered and he tried to get the words out. "I am," he finally told her. Hortense's eyes filled with tears. As she took his confession, she scanned his features. He had a round, pale face with a straight nose, ruddy cheeks, piercing, deep-set brown eyes, bushy sideburns, and curly brown hair that he wore slicked back with oil. As he cried, he confessed that he was from the Virginia island, the son of Jewish, Danish sailor and merchant and a Black island woman. He had been passing for white since he had arrived in New Orleans from the Caribbean as a boy, rising from working on the docks to commanding a ship in the mid-20s. Hortense plunged her face into the sleeve of his velvet jacket and sobbed heavily. "My father will never let us marry, and I cannot deceive or disobey him. Our dream has ended, but I will love you as long as I live," she said. "Go, you must go," Hortense told Ledersloff. My heart will always belong to you. Run away, run, William. I must tell my father," she shouted after him as he retreated into the night. Hortense came from the aristocratic New Orleans family that owned slaves and would strongly disapprove of Hortense marrying a man of color. After Ledersloff left, she went inside the house and told her father about him. Incensed, her father announced that the wedding was off, dragged her to the door of her room, and pushed her inside. "You'll never see that nigger again," he swore, turning the key and locking her in. The next day, Ledersloff received a package from Hortense's father with the engagement ring inside and deciding to leave New Orleans. He sold everything he owned and purchased a ship. The day he was to leave the city, he was walking down Canal Street and was passed by a funeral procession. He stood in the doorway of a store and watched the mourners go by. He spotted Hortense's mother, father, and sister in one of the carriages, and his heart sank. That night, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it and greeted by a priest, the man handed Ledersloff a small gold cross, which he immediately recognized as Hortense. Hortense's last words were that she wanted you to have this, the priest told him. In 1841, Ledersloff left New Orleans. He sailed to California, then a remote Mexican territory. As he stepped off the gangplank of his ship in Yerba Buena Cove, he saw a backwater of thick forests and green hills dotted with Indian communities, military forts, cattle farms, Catholic missions. Deciding he would live openly as a mixed-race man, he settled in San Francisco and started an import-export company, shipping tallow and animal pelts from California to Hawaii and Alaska. Once that business turned a profit, he used the money to open a general store, a warehouse, a lumberyard, a shipping business. He also built San Francisco's first hotel. San Francisco had very few inhabitants at the time. Ledersloff, still trying to mend his broken heart, seemed to relish the isolation. His only friends were his employees, a bartender at his hotel, and his black laundress. At night, they would go down to the beach on the northwest coast of San Francisco to swim. Sometimes they just sit on the rocks, looking up at the moon and talk until the sun came up, listening to the waves crash on the shore. In 1844, Ledersloff, then Mexican California's most prominent resident, was granted citizenship by the Mexican government. In return for his allegiance, Mexico gave him more than 35,000 acres of undeveloped land. His acquisition made him the largest landowner in the area. Ledersloff built a large mansion in the hills of San Francisco, which he referred to with tongue-in-cheek as the cottage. His house was a New Orleans-style home with dozens of rooms, a wraparound porch, and the state's only flower garden. His estate functioned as a de facto U.S. embassy in Mexico, California territory, a convivial host. He received generals and politicians at his residence. He served his guests beer and meat and offered them cigars. He apologized for not having better whiskey, which was hard to come by in the West. We get what we get, we would tell them. Would you like some tequila? He spoke with a strange accent, a mix of his father's Danish and mother's Caribbean patois and a southern drawl. In 1846, when Mexico went to war with the United States, Ladislav switched his allegiances to the Americans and was appointed United States Vice Consul to Mexico. After the Mexican-American War ended and the U.S. annexed California, the U.S. government made Ladislav the treasurer of the territory. In 1847, he built California's first public school and a horse racing track for the citizens' entertainment. In 1848, when gold was discovered in Sacramento Valley, the value of his property and business skyrocketed to over $1 million, making him the first African American to achieve a net worth of more than $1 million in history of the United States. That's probably a lot of money in today's dollars, man. One spring night, Ladislav retired to the bed in his quarters on the top floor of his mansion. The next morning, doctors pronounced him dead of brain fevers. Flags in San Francisco were hung at half-mast, and Californians wept for the loss of one of their most beloved. After his death, Joseph Folsom, a real estate investor, traveled to Virginia Islands and found Ladislav's estranged mother, Anna Marie Sparks, his sole known heir. He convinced her to sign over his son's property for a payment of $75,000 or $2.1 million in today's dollars. The Ladislav estate was worth more than $1.5 million. $38 million in today's dollars. With a stroke of a pen, the fortune and legacy of America's first black millionaire was stolen. Wow. Anyway, I look forward to reading the rest of the book for the rest of the month with you all. I'm really excited about this book. I hope that everyone's good. Stay well. Pieces, everyone.